The Suarez list is generally something that is not borrowed easily. This is the assumption. Thomason and Kaplan designed a borrowability scale. And they first designed it in '88 and then revised it in 2001. But it's pretty much the same thing. It's more of wishful thinking than based on actual fact, because you can bring out many contact situations where any of this, all of these generalizations have been violated. But I mean, you can at least, I like it because it could be a guiding scale, and you can use it to see how many points in it you actually contradict. And I mean, it just follows your basic intuition about what would happen in a contact situation. So when you don't know anything and you come into contact, let's say, the Piraha people go over to Pirahais are a small ethnicity in Amazon, and they cross over to the Portuguese-speaking part of Brazil, or Brazilians go into Piraha territory. They will first pick up non-basic stuff, which is not exactly true, because you go, I mean, you want to know how do you say yes and no. You want to know the objects around you, and they usually belong to your Suarez list. But in a casual contact, you borrow non-basic words. Then if you continue, that contact continues, say trade is developed, you start to borrow function words and some minor non-structural borrowing. And in a more intense contact, the Suarez list may start to be borrowed. And you will get more moderate structural borrowing, and you can borrow inflectional categories and affixes, and you can start inflecting your native words according to some, if there is a dominant language, you start with inflecting according to the dominant language, and then in a heavy-duty contact you borrow extensively, including Suarez list, and there is also heavy structural borrowing. This is a checklist. It has been, various points of it have been disproven, and what is more, it was based on their work with in a contact zone in Mexico. Both of them work with languages of Mexico. So there is like some factual basis for it, but apparently it wasn't enough. And since when people work on borrowing ever since, everybody who touches on borrowing finds that this is wrong, that grammatical categories can be borrowed even at a very casual stage, and we don't know how. So people think that, well, it may stay as a borrowability scale that you work against, but nobody has produced something that is actually true to the fact, because it is hard to generalize over stages of borrowing, wholesale borrowing from the entire language. What I wanted to show you is the result of a project that took place at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig. That project concentrated on borrowing of vocabulary. And how borrowing works across vocabulary and grammar, we still have very little good generalizations to offer. But these people decided to concentrate on what can be borrowed vocabulary-wise. Is it true that you never borrow Suarez items from the Suarez list? So they selected 41 languages from around the globe in a good typological fashion, and they went through the vocabulary of each of these languages with the specialists on each language, and they identified borrowings in these languages and where these borrowings came from, how old these borrowings are, and how well they're integrated into the grammar of these languages. So you can find out like how many languages have a borrowed word for I, and how many languages, and where are they, and which languages does this I come from, and how many languages did a specific language borrow from. English is a language that has borrowed from notorious number of languages. I counted up to, they count up to 49 languages. The blue, I will make the land map live in a minute. But those are basically wall-style maps. And many of the people who worked in walls were in this project too. So you get the languages that English borrowed from, and they're in blue. And then you get a list of the words that are being borrowed. You can zoom in and see that there are very many languages at different stages of European history that English has borrowed from. Latin and Middle French and Middle High German and Old French and Old Norse, and the list is very long, and as I said, it covers about 49 languages. Then you can go to the word, see where it comes from, and what the source word looked like. So you see the cues that it comes, okay, that's what the relation is. Okay, if it's clearly related to its source, so it's related to early Latin accusare, and this is how its source work does look like. So you can do this, and then you can go and see which language is borrowed from English into this existing database. Okay. You can search on which vocabularies are present, and that gives you a list of languages and who consulted on that vocabulary and how many items are in this borrowed vocabulary. You can search on meanings, and the meanings are grouped according to a semantic field. There are also scores. There are the numbers of meaning in each semantic field that have been borrowed. There is a borrowing, you can sort by borrowing score, by age score, how old they are, by how simplified they are. So I just sorted by the borrowed score, and you see that spatial relations have a very low borrowing score. Body parts are next to have a low borrowing score. Then follow sense and motion and physical word. The semantic fields that have a very high borrowing score are the modern world, social and political relations, religion and belief. I thought I'd run a little experiment and apply. I mean, this is like based on 41 languages, and they identify certain domains like agriculture and vegetation and the modern world and social and political relations to be the most borrowable semantic domains. I ran lists between borrowed words in Turkish and Bulgarian. You know, Bulgarian has very many borrowed words from Turkish. So if I find my presentation, that will be good.